So recently, I had the opportunity to visit Puerto Rico. That trip and moving are the reason there was no dirt dispatch last week. And for me, one of the most exciting things about visiting someplace new is the chance to experience the variety of flora and fauna that are native to that place, the things that I otherwise wouldn't get to see if I stayed home. Now, admittedly, it was a short visit, and I was limited to just one small part of the island near the capital of San Juan. But I made the most of it, and I got to see quite a few new to me birds and other critters. So, naturally, that's what I'm going to talk about today. A couple of the birds that I saw during my short visit to Puerto Rico. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara, and this is the Dispatches from the Forest podcast. So let's start with what quickly became one of my new favorite birds, the Greater Antillean grackle, known in Puerto Rico as Chango. A very common bird about the size of, say, a blue jay or an American robin. Now, it didn't become my favorite because of colorful plumage. It doesn't have that going for it. These birds are entirely glossy black except for bright yellow eyes. And those eyes with their black pupil in the center make them look a little bit silly, like somebody stuck googly eyes on them. But I'll get to why I fell in love with these birds in a second. The male has a large rudder-like tail, and when I say rudder-like, it's because the tail is vertical, like the rudder of a ship, as opposed to horizontal like most birds. This is especially noticeable when they're flying. When perching, the tail is a little less noticeably vertical, appearing more wedge or V-shaped. The female is the same color but less glossy and has a shorter, less wedge-shaped tail. Now, as its name suggests, it's found in the Greater Antilles Islands of the Caribbean Ocean. If you're not familiar, and full disclosure, I was not, I had to look it up, but the Greater Antilles Islands consist of Cuba, Hispaniola, which is the island shared by the Dominican Republic and Haiti, Puerto Rico, and Jamaica. And it also includes nearby smaller islands like Navassa Island and the Caymans. And in fact, there's 7 subspecies of Greater Antillean grackle, each restricted to a specific island or a small group of islands. Their general habitat includes mangroves, marshes, savanna, coconut plantations, open fields, agricultural land, woodland, and they're the type of bird that lives quite well in the parks and gardens of cities. Basically, they were all over the place. Now, Greater Antillean grackles form flocks. In some communal roosts, they can number in the thousands. And they also form breeding colonies, although not a lot is known about their mating system, just that males have been observed feeding the chicks. And they are, as you might expect, omnivores, feeding on a variety of seeds, fruits, and vertebrates, the eggs and chicks of other birds, lizards, and anything left behind by humans. And that's why I came to love them. They're bold, they're curious, and they're confident around people. They may not be pretty, but they're fun to watch. In the outdoor seating areas of restaurants, which are numerous in Puerto Rico, we watched them swoop in or run up to grab food off the floor, often landing quite close as the back of your chair. If there were dishes or food left on a table when the occupants left, several of the birds would often land on the table immediately, competing for whatever was left behind. I even saw one take several sips from a leftover cup of coffee. But what was truly entertaining was the displays the males would do, presumably to establish their dominance, to eat from the table first. They'd fluff out their feathers, hold their wings out to the side, then point their bills straight up and vocalize. And their calls are relatively musical for a grackle. The most common was a sound kind of like a squeaky pump. But they have a variety of calls, including a chuck sound, various whistles, and harsh notes. While some subspecies on smaller islands have suffered from hurricanes, overall these silly, googly eyed birds are doing just fine on the larger islands and are not considered to be threatened overall. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, at least color wise, was a bird called a Venezuelan troupial. Commonly referred to simply as a troupial, the most common explanation being that it comes from the French troupe because they live in flocks. Although, that said, I only saw one and it was hanging around with a bunch of grackles. Now, in Venezuela, they pronounce it slightly different as troupial, which may be onomatopoeic because their primary song is described as three whistles that sound like troupial. More on their vocals in a minute, though. So either French or onomatopoeia, but who knows? Either way, this beautiful and vocally gifted bird is the national bird of Venezuela, since it's primarily distributed through Venezuela and into northern Colombia. But it can also be found on several islands off the Venezuelan coast and has been successfully introduced into several Caribbean islands, with Puerto Rico being the most successful. So it's not native to Puerto Rico, but that begs the question, what's its impact on native Puerto Rican species? And that hasn't been studied. So is it invasive, problematic? We just don't know. Now, troupials are a species of oriole, although fairly large in size, bigger than the grackles, with a long tail and a bulky bill. It has a black head and upper breast. The feathers on the front of the neck and the upper breast stick outward, which makes an uneven boundary between the black and the orange of the bird's lower breast and underside. The rest of the orange color is found on the upper and lower back, separated by black shoulders. The wings are mostly black, except for a white streak that runs the length of the wing when they're closed. Now, like its grackle friends, the eyes are yellow, but surrounding each of the eyes is a patch of bright blue naked skin. They're truly an eye-catching bird, and I literally slammed on the brakes when I spotted it. Now, in their native habitat, Venezuelan troupials inhabit dry areas like woodlands, dry scrub, plain, open savanna, and there they mainly forage for fruits of the giant cactus, which makes up their entire diet when it's in season. In Puerto Rico, though, there are no giant cacti, at least not where I was. Puerto Rico is not a dry place. Fortunately, these birds will also eat other fruits like mangoes, sopalillos, papaya, soursop, dates, and cherries. And like their grackle friends, they've been known to eat a juvenile bird, an unhatched egg or two. Here in the U.S., people put out grape jelly and oranges for the Baltimore Orioles. We think of them as sweet little songbirds who feed on insects, nectar, and fruit. But their Venezuelan cousins have a dark side. You see, Venezuelan troupials are obligate nest pirates. They don't make a nest of their own, but instead they either find a vacant nest or drive the adults away from an active nest. Which also means that in Puerto Rico, they're literally pirates of the Caribbean. Venezuelan troupials are capable of violent attacks against established nesters, and upon taking over a nest, they tend to eat the eggs or young nestlings left behind in their newly acquired home. And returning to the question of their impact on native Puerto Rican species, knowing this information suggests that finding out that impact really should be on somebody's short list of PhD dissertation projects. Because after they pirate a nest, they also fiercely defend the area against would-be intruders. Even their mating behavior is described as defensive in both males and females, which I think is probably one of the funniest descriptions of bird mating behavior that I've ever heard. But males usually sing as a way to attract females or when defending themselves from other competing troupials. Duetting behavior in troupials is used to defend territory and maintain contact between mated pairs. In duetting, the song of one bird is answered by its mate, usually with a different song, forming an asynchronous overlapping duet. These solos and duets can vary considerably in both structure and composition. And like I mentioned before, their main song sounds like they're almost saying their name, Troupial. When they sing, troupials hold their heads down or stretch their necks exaggeratedly upward and freeze with their tail raised. The hackles of the throat are prominently fluffed out, giving them a very distinct appearance. Now, eventually, despite the defensive nature of their mating, the adult troupials will produce their own clutch of 3 to 4 eggs in their pirated nest that hatch after about 2 weeks of incubation. And again, like the Greater Antillean grackle, Venezuelan troupials are not considered to be threatened on a global scale. They can be found in disturbed habitats including secondary forests, plantations, and suburban and urban areas. And because of that adaptability, they probably don't suffer significantly from habitat loss and degradation. That said, they are valued as a caged bird, as a pet, and despite it being illegal, they're often sold on roadsides or in pet stores, and children are known to frequently raid nests to extract the nestlings. But since November 11, 1957, the Venezuelan troupial has been the national bird of Venezuela, and it appears on the back of certain denominations of Venezuelan currency. And on that note, my friends, we come to the end of this episode. If you'd like to support the podcast, here's how you can do that. Become a patron. Subscriptions start at just $5 a month, and with 3 paid months, you get free Dispatches from the Forest merch. Find all the details at patreon.com/dispatchesfromtheforest. Donate through either PayPal or Venmo using my email address, dispatchesfromtheforest@gmail.com, which is also how you can contact me if you have any questions, comments, or requests for future episodes. You can also donate using the Cash App and the hashtag ForestNerd. You're welcome to send a check. Just message me for my current mailing address. And of course, there's Dispatches from the Forest merch for sale. Go check out the merch store at cafepress.com/shop/dispatchesfromtheforest. Click on products, see all that we have to offer. Finally, you can follow Dispatches from the Forest on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And if you go to Instagram and TikTok, you can see videos of Greater Antillean grackles. One last thing to say, and that's I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara, reminding you to go outside and get dirty. Dispatches from the Forest recognizes that the lands where we live, work, and recreate are the traditional homelands of the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho people. We understand that this land holds immense significance for the original stewards, native nations, and peoples of this region. The Dispatches from the Forest podcast is a production of Dispatches from the Forest and may not be used or rebroadcast whole or in part without express written permission.